right, and welcome everyone to another episode of Broken Families, where we host conversations on divorce, parental alienation, and high conflict relationships. My name is Andrew Folkler.
And I'm Barbara Lapointe. Today, we're going to talk about support groups, how to set one up and how to run one and what it takes. And so this is why we've brought on a very special guest speaker to really dive deep into this topic. Wendy Perry is an alienated parent due to parental alienation. She started hosting monthly parental alienation support groups back in 2011. Wendy has hosted various parental alienation awareness and education events. Her meetings and events have been attended by hundreds of people from around the world. And she's been featured by top experts in the field of parental alienation, such as Dr. Richard Warshak and many others. Wendy was the parent liaison to the American Psychological Association and accompanied by Dr. Craig Childress for the delivery of the petition to end the pathology of parental alienation for all children everywhere. She is certified by the Texas Education Agency to train all grade levels of school teachers, school counselors, and school administrators specifically on the subject of parental alienation in the state of Texas. Wendy's story was featured on the documentary Divorce Corp. She's met with elected officials in Washington, D.C. to discuss parental alienation, and she's spoken at the National Press Clubs and many conferences. Wendy hosts private online parental alienation support groups that have members worldwide. Her private support groups include live support meetings and focuses on helping target parents and grandparents to live their best life, even though they are affected by parental alienation. Wendy's passion to encourage people affected by parental alienation is to strive to thrive, not just survive. So without further ado, warm welcome to Wendy. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Wendy,
Absolutely.
you have a really powerful story, and we've got a lot of ground to cover with respect to support groups, but I'd just like to invite you to share your personal story.
Sure. Just to give a little summary of my story, I have 3 children, and I was alienated from 2 of my 3 children. I was never alienated from 1 of my 3 children, and I'm reunified with 1 of the 2 that I was alienated from, and I'm still alienated from 1 of my kids, and I've been alienated from her for about 12 years now. So it started for us when my 2 oldest kids were teenagers and my youngest was almost a teenager. So around that preteen, early teen age, which seems to be very common in parental alienation. But I do appreciate you asking me a little bit about my story, because I like for people to know that wherever they are in the journey of parental alienation, I've been there. I've been fully, completely, severely alienated. I've also experienced a reunification, which is not all, sunshine and rainbows like people think it will be. It's very, very challenging. And then I have the situation of being alienated from some of my kids, but not all of my kids, which is more common than people might think. So it's an ongoing thing for most people dealing with parental alienation. As I said, even when you have a reunification, there's still some things to work through. And for many families, the alienating behaviors continue even if you do have a reunification. So it's something that you always have to be mindful of. And so that's a little bit about my story, where we were and where we are today.
Wendy, I think it's very significant that you were featured on Divorce Court. I can't watch that without crying. I love that documentary. What was that experience like for you?
The experience of the documentary was really positive. It was really good. They contacted me and said, we're making a documentary about parental alienation. And I was very skeptical I was very cautious. And at first, I wasn't even sure if it was real. I said, who are you and how did you find me? I just thought it was very bizarre that I got a call from some random person that they were making a documentary about parental alienation and they wanted to talk to me. And the person that called me said, we've been Googling parental alienation and we've been Googling corrupt family court cases. And every time we Google those things, your name is always at the very top of the Google search. And so we want to talk to you. And I gave us a lot of careful consideration. You know, when you are an alienated or targeted parent, usually the alienating parent has always got eyes on you. They're always watching everything you do and always maximizing any possible opportunity to make the alienation worse. And so I really had to give it some very, very careful consideration. And my kids' privacy was very important to me. So I had that discussion with the makers of the documentary that those things were very important to me. And they assured me that it was going to be done in a very, very respectable way, that they were going to respect the privacy of all of the kids that were referenced in the documentary, and that it was going to be done in a way that was not disparaging to the other parent, the alienating parents. And I think they did a good job. I think it's a really great documentary. I think it's a really important documentary. I wish we could find a way that anyone who was going to go through a divorce with kids would have to watch it. You know, it's really, really, it's a very eye-opening documentary about the way family court really operates if you are getting a divorce that we would call high conflict, or if you're going to court for a modification. Sometimes people end up going to family court long after the divorce is over to do a modification. But if anyone is watching who is, like I said, we would call it a high conflict situation, then it's very important to watch that documentary if you can. And it's available, if you go to divorcecorp.com, you can find ways to watch the documentary.
Just being a Canadian, I found it very relevant to Canada as well.
I think it's relevant really worldwide. I've got people in my support groups from all over the world, and we tend to think that where we are is a very unique situation, right? Like, well, this is the problem in our courts in the United States, or, you know, it's not. All of these issues are really global, not just parental alienation, but family court issues. So anyone, anywhere should hop online and watch this documentary if you feel like it could be relevant to your life.
Yeah, good point, Wendy. It's really a systemic issue.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I imagine when people go through these kinds of struggles and these situations, you know, some people get really caught into the whirlwind of things, but some people are, you know, it ignites that fire in them. They want to make a change. They want to get out there. I think that leads into our first question on if they wanted to do something like set up a support group, where would that person who has all these ambitions and these goals and these bright ideas, where do they start?
That is a great question. I would say if you want to start a support group, to contact me and I would be happy to help you. I've helped many people with this over the years, and I actually gave trainings on this about a month ago, specifically training people on how to start and how to host in-person support groups, and not just how to start them and to host and facilitate them, but how to maintain them, how to keep growing your support group, and how to make it a really as positive experience as possible for the people coming to your support group. So I would say if you're watching this and you have an interest in possibly starting a support group yourself, reach out to me. I will be doing another training really soon on this. The response was so great that I've had more people contact me and say, hey, I wanted to do that and I missed it. So we will have another training on that very, very soon.
Definitely.
So in this new brave world of online versus in person, what do you recommend? Like, what are some pros and cons to virtual versus in person in terms of support groups?
Good question. I've done both. So the way I started out, I started having support group meetings in 2011. And at that time, it wasn't that long ago, but at that time, really, people were not doing online meetings. There wasn't Zoom. There was Skype. That was about it. And really, people just were not doing things like this online. So for many, many years, we had in-person meetings uh, every month for many years, and they were awesome, very, very great. Now we do most of our meetings virtually, just like we're doing this chat today. So the pros and cons, they're both so great, and it would be hard to say that one is better than the other, in person versus online. I think we're very blessed that we're able to do this online now. And like I said, in our support groups now, we've got people from all over the world, and we have live meetings just like this. And it's really powerful to have that kind of diversity, to have people from all over the world to get to know each other and bond and share experiences and support each other. But I will say that having in-person meetings, there is still something really special about that, just to be in the same room with someone and to really see them face to face in person, be able to give them a hug, and to shake their hand. And in-person meetings, I think there is still a place for them, even though a lot of what we're doing now is online, and I think a lot of it will stay online so that we can reach more people. But in person is there's still something very special about it that you can't get by getting together online. And in fact, the training that I just gave was for people that have an interest in starting in-person support groups. So I think when COVID calms down a little bit, when we're able to, I think we will start seeing more and more in-person support groups coming up again. Right now, there's not very many in-person support groups, and historically speaking, there has never been a lot of in-person parental alienation support groups. But I think, like I said, when COVID calms down, I think people will be anxious to start having in-person support groups, and there's an interest for it. People want to attend those in-person support meetings, and people want to host them too. People feel passionate about that. So I think, they're both great. And I know some people who do both. Some people who go to in-person meetings and they do online meetings both.
Absolutely. I guess how often would they host these meetings? I mean, would it be like just like a couple hours a week or something like that, or more?
If you're gonna host meetings yourself, what I train people on is to really assess your life and your availability and how much time and effort you really have to commit to it, because it is a commitment. It's a big commitment to host parental alienation support meetings. When we were having our in-person support meetings, we had our meetings once per month, and that seemed to work really well for us. I know people who have tried to have 2 in-person meetings per month, and it just seemed to be a little too much. People are busy also, so it's kind of hard for some people to commit to come to something like that 2 times per month. But we would have our meetings 1 time per month. The meetings would last about 3 hours, and we would sometimes have presenters. We would have guest speakers come in and give a presentation. We always had an itinerary, like an agenda, and a format that we followed. So it was a really good format, and we did not always have presenters or guest speakers, but we did, pretty often. So now most of my meetings are done online, and we still usually do those 1 time per month. But we have other activities. We have other things that we do in our support group, not just meetings. We have much more than that. So just having a meeting 1 time per month seems to work well for everyone time-wise, but then we have ways we connect with each other in between those live meetings.
All right, Wendy. Well, let's just imagine that someone out there wants to start a support group and wants it to be powerful and transformative and very supportive, what would you recommend in terms of making it engaging for anyone attending? How might we accomplish that?
Well, the first thing I would say, and this sounds like kind of like, of course, you know, you've got to be really, really thoroughly educated about parental alienation. And it sounds kind of silly to say that because you think, well, that's a given. If someone's going to host a parental alienation support group, surely they understand it. But sometimes that's not the case. And so I would say, if you want to host a support group and you want it to be really engaging and helpful to people, the first thing is to really get as educated as you can about parental alienation by studying the work of experts like Dr. Richard Warshak, Dr. Amy Baker, Dr. William Burnett. And I don't mean just going into social media groups like Facebook groups and reading people's posts. I mean, really study their books and watch their videos. The other thing that I would do is learn about how to host a support group. And it doesn't have to be a parental alienation support group, but to learn, because there are certain things that are shown to be successful and engaging for support groups. For example, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, have a format. You don't just have people come and you just all hang out and you just kind of, chit chat for 3 or 4 hours. That's not a support group. That's a social gathering. So you want to have a format. You want to have an agenda, and people really like that too. That's very comforting to them to know what to expect when they come to your support meetings. And so I would do that. Start with educating yourself as much as possible, and then start learning about what do I need to do as a host or a facilitator for a support meeting to make it engaging and to make it so that it will help people.
Absolutely. I imagine they would also need some level of, you could say, emotional self-regulation, the ability to be the rock for somebody else and not depend on the group for therapy, if that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. Absolutely. Look, if you are not really emotionally grounded yourself, if you are not in a stable emotional place yourself, you probably should not be hosting parental alienation support group meetings right now. And, we've all been there, and we know that parental alienation is an emotional roller coaster ride. So you're still going to have your moments. I still have my moments where, maybe something happens and it's a really bad parental alienation day. But if you are hosting a support meeting, like you said, Andrew, you need to be the rock. You need to be the person in that moment during your meetings. You need to be the person who is calm, stable, rational. And it's very, very important, because these people coming to these meetings, they really do count on you for that. They don't count on you to know all the answers. And if you are hosting or facilitating a parental alienation support group, you should not even pretend that you have all the answers. That's not your role. But it is very important that you be calm and you be grounded. And I would also say it's very important to be to always remember that parental alienation is not a father's rights issue or a mother's rights issue. Because if you host support meetings, you're going to find that you've got a really diverse crowd. You've got moms, you've got dads, you'll have some grandparents that come. Sometimes we have aunts and uncles that come, close family members. We've had siblings come, older siblings. So it's very important to stay in the understanding that parental alienation is not a gender issue. And also, the people who come to your meetings will probably want to talk about family court and legislation, things like that. But remember, a lot of people are alienated and they don't go to court at all. They just deal with it on their own. And so if you are promoting that you're having a parental alienation support group, you want to make sure that the focus stays mostly on parental alienation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
It sounds like you'd like to create a really inclusive and welcoming environment as well.
Very much so. Very much so. You really have to be very non-judgmental and very accepting of everyone who comes in to your meetings, because you'll have, like I said, moms, dads, you'll have younger people, older people, also people of all different faiths. Parental alienation does not discriminate. And that shows in the people who come to your support meetings. You'll have people of all different beliefs, and just, from every, opposite end that you could think of in anything, politics, religion, all of that. So you have to be welcoming and accepting and compassionate and have empathy for everyone who comes, because the bottom line is you're all there to give each other support and compassion and empathy regarding parental alienation.
So hypothetically, maybe you get somebody who does bring in some of these polarizing thoughts and frustrations, and maybe they're just in the heat of the moment and they vent off something that potentially offends another group member. How do you mitigate that tension within the group?
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. If you have support meetings, on an ongoing regular basis for enough times, it's going to happen. And so one thing that I always recommend to people when I'm training them on how to do support groups, and something that I do myself, is I give everyone a time limit for sharing. And there's a few reasons for this. If you've ever hosted any kind of meeting, you know that there's always someone there who wants to monopolize and take all of the time. They've always got something to say, and and then other people don't get the opportunity to speak. And I learned that the hard way many years ago, where I was just letting people talk as much as they wanted to. And there was an occasion where a regular who came to all of our meetings, they took all of the time, and at the end of the night, a few people did not get to speak at all. And they were very upset. And they contacted me and said, I'm really upset. I didn't get to speak. And I really wanted to. I really wanted to share. I had a lot on my mind, a lot on my heart, and I needed my time, and I didn't get to. And they were upset with me, rightly so, because I did not ensure that they had that time. So what we do now, and what I train other people to do, advise them to do, is if you're going to have a support meeting, give everyone a set amount of time and an equal amount of time. And you have to be really firm with it. I actually set a timer, and an alarm goes off. And then when the alarm goes off, we go on to the next person. So to your point, Andrew, that also cuts down on the time that someone is able to, can I say rant?
Yeah,
Go on a tangent, right? It's like, oh, well, your time is up. Thank you for your, opinion. And when you've got a group of people together for a meeting like that, if you have someone who does what you mentioned, I wouldn't call them out in front of everyone. Again, you're going to have a really diverse group, and they're going to really believe in whatever it is that they're talking about. And we've had this happen. We've had people come in who are very, extreme politically, and they feel like that has something to do with parental alienation, or they're very extreme mother's rights or father's rights, and they really feel like that's the issue. We let them have their time. And when their time is up, we say, thank you so much, and we move on to someone else. And the other people at your meeting are going to understand that you let everyone have an opportunity to speak, and you let everyone have they're entitled to their own thoughts and their own ideas. And you can hope that by them coming to the meetings that they start to have a little more of a balanced view. But it's really not our place to necessarily try to, change their view or to judge them. And we hope that as they keep coming, that they'll start to see more points of view and kind of rethink things.
Absolutely.
Now if someone is really hostile towards someone else at the meeting, of course, we would put a stop to that and, probably ask them to leave if they can't, calm down. So.
It sounds like we're starting to talk about ground rules or some basic boundaries that you'd set up before you set up a support group. So what other rules or boundaries might you suggest putting into place for a support group?
Well, a few things that I would encourage people to do is to have a sign-in sheet. I think it's really important to have a sign-in sheet so that you know who is there, because if you have a lot of people come in, you might at the end of it go, who were those people, right? So it's very good to have a sign-in sheet, have their name, have their email address, maybe their phone number. You can decide what you want to get on your sign-in sheet. And I am a firm believer in having a printed out agenda for every meeting. I think it's really important when people come in that you hand them this piece of paper, you greet them, you hand them this piece of paper and you say, here's our agenda for the meeting tonight. And that might not sound like a boundary, creating a boundary, but it actually really is, because it when you have that agenda, you've got the time on it, like 6 o'clock, welcome and mingle. 6:15, read the mission statement of our meetings. 6:30, guest speaker. 7 o'clock, sharing time. So it is setting boundaries, really, because it's telling people this is how we are going to do this tonight. This is how we're all going to do this. So that is a kind of a gentle way, I would say, to set boundaries with everyone. It lets them know that this is how we're going to be doing this. This is the expectation. And as I said just a second ago, when you do your agenda, one of the things you probably want to have is the mission of your meetings. This is the mission of our support group. This is the mission of our support group meetings. And within that, that is when you would want to probably talk about that, we're not judgmental. We're not father's rights or mother's rights. That's where you would cover some of those boundaries.
Like inclusivity and valuing non-judgment and sharing time. Anything else that would be relevant in terms of values or boundaries for a group?
I would say, again, if you're going to have what you call a parental alienation support group, I would try to keep it really focused on parental alienation. A lot of times in your meetings, you might want to have a time set aside where you can talk about family court issues, or have a time set aside where you can talk about legislation, because those things are important to a lot of people, and they do cross over and touch on people affected by parental alienation. So that would be, I don't know if that would be a boundary, but kind of that could be part of your format to have that, because you do want to have the opportunity to talk about those things, but you don't want those things to become the whole focus of your support meeting.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So a lot of people who may consider leading these support groups, they're not going to be psychologists or lawyers or anyone really up there as experts in certain fields. And I know you mentioned it's important to do your research and be prepared. How do you help mitigate the knowledge that you don't know as a person?
Well, I'll tell you, over the years, we've actually had quite a few mental health professionals, counselors and therapists come to our meetings, and they would come to our meetings on a regular basis. They came every month for many years because they had an interest in parental alienation, both personally and professionally. So if you start having parental alienation support group meetings, you will find that many times a mental health professional will end up coming and they will keep coming. I have found that with other support groups, not just my own. And it's nice to have them there. But you do want to make it clear to everyone that they're not there to give counseling or therapy, to anyone in your meeting, but it is nice to have their presence. But how to handle that because like I said earlier, you don't have all the answers and you never want to act like you do, and you shouldn't think that you do. So one thing that we used to do for our in-person meetings was we actually had a library of books that we would bring and sit out for all of the members, and they could just sign them out and take them home and bring them back the next time. But it was a diverse library. It was books from a lot of the different experts, like Dr. Warshak, Dr. Amy Baker, Dr. Craig Childress. We also had some books that were written by alienated parents. There are quite a few good books out there written by parents. And so we would just offer a diversity of education for the people coming to our meetings. And then as a host or facilitator yourself, you should always be looking for that and reading those things yourself. New research that comes out from Dr. Jennifer Harmon, the people who are on the PASG, the Parental Alienation Study Group. Several of them are coming out with new research, new articles all the time. So, you should, just like, any professional gets continuing education, you're not a professional if you're hosting a support group, but it is important that you stay current on the most recent research and education that's available in regards to the subject that you're covering in your support group meetings.
Absolutely. I imagine guest speakers would be another easy way to really hone in on a very specific topic and really share that knowledge with everyone else.
Having guest speakers is great. We had someone come who was running a family court watch group, and that was so interesting. This person actually was really great at facilitating groups of people to go in and do court watching in family court. We also had a therapist, a licensed therapist, come in who specialized in doing custody evaluations. And that was really, really interesting too. And it does fill those gaps of some things that you might not have talked about before, or that you might not know too much about. And for anyone who's going to host support group meetings, I wouldn't say you should have a guest speaker or guest presenter at every meeting, because it can take up a lot of time. And sometimes it can take up most of your time, but I would do it. Let's say you're going to have meetings every month for a year. I would try to have a guest speaker or a guest presenter, maybe 2 or 3 times that year. It really is. It's really, really interesting. And it also draws people in and kind of, keeps them coming back, which is nice. But, that's the other thing. If you can really gauge how well your support group meetings are doing by how many people keep coming back. And we had people that came back for years, and we had our meetings for many, many, many years. And we had a lot of people who came to every meeting every month for all of those years. And I think when they keep coming back, that tells you that they're getting something positive from your support group. And that's what you want. You want people to come away from your meetings feeling better than worse, feeling better than when they came in. And of course, sometimes it can be very emotional, but I would say we always ended our meetings on a positive note and with people just feeling understood. And that's the main thing with support group meetings for parental alienation, is you want the people coming in to feel understood, to feel like they're with other people who understand what they're going through, because that can be very hard to find when you're an alienated or a targeted parent.
That's a really powerful point, just to be seen, heard, and understood. I mean, we've touched on this a little bit, but are there any mistakes that one might want to avoid if you were going to jump into setting up a group?
I would say know your gifts in a nutshell. If you are considering hosting a parental alienation support group, know your gifts. If you are, we're talking about signs that maybe you should not run a support group for parental alienation. If you are extremely disorganized, I would say that's one one thing in the minus column. If you're going to do like pluses and minuses, if you're super disorganized, I would put that in your minus column, because it does take some organization when people show up for your meetings. If you are super disorganized, you don't have an agenda, you don't have a plan for your meeting, that is not comforting to the people who are coming to your meeting. They're looking for support, and understanding, but they're also looking for calmness, and so if they come in and you're super disorganized, that would not be a plus. The other thing is, if you are really extremely shy, hosting a parental alienation support group is probably not for you, because you're going to have a lot of people to talk to. And as the host or facilitator, I firmly believe that you should greet every single person when they come in. You should be at the door and you should say, "Hi, I'm Wendy. So nice to meet you. Welcome to the meeting. Sign in here. We've got coffee over here if you want coffee," right? So if you have a really hard time doing that, and you can expect to have, it really varies, but let's say on average you have 20 people. If that really causes you a lot of anxiety to think of even greeting people and talking to them, then that would again be in the minus column. But besides greeting them, you're going to stand up and open every meeting and go over the agenda and introduce your speakers and presenters. And you should also vet your speakers and presenters. You should talk to them first. So if you're extremely shy, probably running a support group for parental alienation is probably not the best idea. The other thing that I would say, we talked about this earlier, is you need to be in a good place yourself emotionally, or at least able to regulate your emotions, when you need to. If you are in a really, really, really topsy-turvy emotional state yourself and you have trouble managing your emotions, then you probably should not be running a support group right now for alienated parents or targeted parents, because it is very emotional. There's a lot of emotion in the room. You'll have people cry, you'll have people get really upset, and you need to be the one who can be calm and manage your emotions. So those are some of the things that I would say, if you struggle with any of those things, I'm not saying you should never run a parental alienation support group, but maybe not right now. Maybe make those goals things for you to work on,
Yeah. Or worst case, if you're a disorganized, shy person, find a organized people person and hype them up and get them to help you out.
Get a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
Get a mentor. If you're like, I really want to do this. I really want to host parental alienation support groups, but I struggle with these things. Get a mentor. I have a mentor, and my mentor is one of the top experts in the field of parental alienation, and he has a mentor, right? So I think that's something that we don't really talk about in the world of parental alienation advocacy. I've never heard anybody talk about it, and maybe we need to start having that conversation, that we need to have mentors. We need to have people who, have gone before us and they're doing what we want to do and they're doing it well, right? Connect with people and say, I've noticed you're really good at this. I would like to try to do something like what you're doing. Will you be my mentor? Will you help me with this? And I've got a few people that I mentor. Like I said, maybe this is something we need to start talking about. Haven't really heard anybody talk about that. And it can be so helpful. And, people in all kinds of businesses have mentors. And if you talk to like top CEOs of, Fortune 500 companies and all that, they really believe in mentorships. So get a mentor. if there's something that you want to do, like run a support group, and you feel like, I just, I need some help, find someone who can mentor you in that.
Especially for women to feel like it's okay to reach out to a mentor. I think it's a concept that's more familiar to men, like you mentioned, CEOs, but for women to have a mentor would be incredible as well.
Mm-hmm.
And just getting back to, maybe you're not ready to go into hosting a support group, doesn't mean that you can't do it in the future after you get past the storm. Would you agree with that?
Oh, definitely. Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
Oh, yes. If you feel like this is something you want to do, but maybe you feel like you need to work on your organization skills, or you need to work on your public speaking, because it's kind of like public speaking, right? When you're talking to the people that come to your meetings, you know, get some training, get a mentor. And this is a lot of what we talk about when I give the actual formal training to people of how to host support groups. Anything that you want to do, that you want to do well, it's smart to do training on it. So, get a mentor, get some training, and say, I don't feel like I'm ready to do this yet, but I want to do it someday. And so then start taking those steps to prepare yourself to do that someday. Definitely.
Cool. It's worth it, right? It's worth it.
And they're very valuable skills altogether. So whether or not it's for your support group, or it'll translate into work, your friends, your social relationships in general, all of that, and just organizing your life, everything kind of comes together when you work on those skills.
Definitely.
Wendy, I'm kind of curious because you've mentioned emotional intensities coming up, like people crying, for example. Do you have any strategies on how to manage that if you had someone cry or become deeply emotional in a group? Like what would one do to address that?
Yeah, it's really common. And I'll share with you that very, very often when someone comes to their very first support meeting, they just sit and cry and they don't say anything. And we go around and give everyone their turn. And when it's their turn, they just start crying. And what they say is, this is the first time I've been in a room with other people who understand what I'm going through and who believe what I say. And when that happens, we tell them it's okay. It's okay to cry. We understand. And we let them cry, and we give them the box of tissues. We pass the box of tissues down that way. And, usually someone will go over and give them a hug. And, there's no wrong way to feel when you go to a support group meeting. And I think that's really important to say. We do hope and we want people to come out of the meetings feeling better, feeling supported, feeling encouraged, but it wouldn't be right to try to control everyone's emotions. It is a very emotional thing, and it's normal and it's natural for people to get upset and to cry about being alienated. It's one of the most painful things that you could possibly go through. And so in our meetings, when people cry, and we do have people cry in our online meetings too, we let them cry and we tell them, I'm really sorry for what you're going through right now. And I think that is probably, you're asking what to do, show them empathy. That's really what you want to do when someone is crying, when they're breaking down, is to show them empathy. And we never say, don't cry, stop crying. Well, your case is not that bad. You don't want to say anything like that. You want to meet them where they are in that really emotional moment, and show them empathy and care.
Oh,
Absolutely.
that's beautiful. I mean, I guess that's why a group like this could be a real resource for a parent being alienated.
People who come to support meetings, some of them, they have no support at all. their friends and their families, their own families, don't understand and don't support them. And that's horrible. It's terrible. But some people who come to support meetings, they have very supportive family and friends. But even your most supportive family and friends, they probably don't want to hear about parental alienation every second that you're talking to them. You know, it's like, geez, you know, all they ever talk about is alienation. You know, can we ever talk about anything else? And when they come to the support meeting, that gives them an opportunity to be in a setting where that's all you're going to talk about. That's all you're going to hear about. This is the place where you can get it all off your chest and talk about it as much as you want to until the timer goes off and it's the other person's time.
Right.
But, you know, so it's very, very important for people to have that, to have a group of people that they can get together with where it's not just okay to talk about alienation, but that's why you're there. You get to talk about it and no one's going to go, oh my gosh, you know, talking about alienation again, right? So it's really important for people to have that outlet.
In the context of either mobilizing legal or policy change or anything like that, how would you introduce that within the group? How do you mobilize the group to participate in, you could say, like extra activities beyond a typical support meeting?
Yeah, awesome question. Well, our support meetings that we had in person for many years, we were very, very, very active in the community. We were much more than just support meetings. So what we did was we had what we called action items. So we would, on our agenda, we would have our opening and introductions, and then we would talk about action items. And those could be a variety of things, like upcoming events in the area that were relevant to parental alienation, pending legislation, things like that. And when we would talk about those things, we would give a little update on that if we had updates on those things, but we would also give them the contact person for that. You know, if you want to get involved in this event, this is who you contact. If you want to go to this conference, this is who you contact. If you want to be involved in this legislative reform movement, you know, this is who you contact about that. So I do think that it's an important part of your support meetings to have that, to have action items, or to have at least events that people can participate in that goes a little bit beyond or is a little bit more. And something else that we did that I think was really important and really, it was very bonding for our support group, was we would volunteer in the community. We would go to events in the community that really were not related to parental alienation at all, but we would go out and volunteer as a group. And this showed people in the community that, you know, there's a stigma with parental alienation, right? There's a stigma, there's an assumption that, well, if you're alienated, then you must have done something to justify that. You must have done something to make your child reject you. And so we would go and we would volunteer as a group for community events and really put ourselves out there. And it was a really positive experience for our support group, because people would see us as nice, normal, regular people who went out and volunteered, and we were a positive force in the community. So things like that, that's something else that you would want to add to your agenda, or, you know, to your activities, is to possibly go out and volunteer and do things in the community as a group.
Absolutely, because I imagine a lot of people coming to this group and they're just sinking into that pit of despair of their story and the pain that and the emotion that comes with it, and something like that can kind of reignite that fire within them, make them feel a little bit more alive, a little bit more rejuvenated in a sense, and push them towards recognizing that they can still be their best self.
Mm-hmm.
And
kind of like a community or or your tribe, right?
Yeah, I think it's so important for alienated parents and grandparents. And I never want to exclude the grandparents because alienation is really, really painful for the grandparents. But it's very important to keep living a balanced life, even though you're dealing with parental alienation. And that can be a challenge. It really can be a challenge for people to live a balanced life. It can be hard for them to not ruminate on it and think about it 24/7. And so if you can create those opportunities for the people in your support group to get out and have fun, get out and volunteer to make a difference in the community, even if it's not about parental alienation, but to get out and volunteer, go to a domestic violence shelter if you can, go to a food pantry, anything that you can do together as a group to to give to the community, but also it's going back to that having a balanced life, right? I'm not just an alienated or a targeted parent. I go out and I serve my community. I go out with the other people in my support group and go bowling or whatever, but have other activities that lead towards that more balanced life.
So find your purpose again, maybe, and find hope. Do you find hope is an element that people are seeking in support groups?
Yeah, definitely. I think all alienated and targeted parents and grandparents are looking for hope. That's probably the number one thing they're looking for is looking for hope. And, it can be kind of hard to find when you're dealing with parental alienation. And so it's, I think they are looking for hope. And that's another reason to stay really up on what is out there as far as research and to get familiar with other advocates, right? And to seek out those stories of hope. And, it's not hopeless. There is hope if you are an alienated parent or grandparent, and it can take a long time. We talk about that in our support group. How do you, build your endurance and tenacity to keep reaching out and to not give up hope. So hope is definitely something that we touch on a lot in the support groups.
Absolutely. So Wendy, we are coming up to that hour mark. I did want to ask you to speak on April 25th being International Parental Alienation Awareness Day. And I know this episode is going to be released on the 25th. Just nicely done on purpose, but but yeah, I was wondering if you could speak about that a bit before we wrap up.
Yeah, definitely. And I wanted to say thank you so much for asking me to be on an episode that is specifically going to air on Parental Alienation Awareness Day. Because in our world, that's our big day every year, Parental Alienation Awareness Day. So yeah, so I'll give a little bit of history about it, and I'll make it really condensed. But April 25th of this year, April 25th, 2021, will be the 16th annual International Parental Alienation Awareness Day. And a lot of people are always surprised when they hear how long it's been going on. So this will be the 16th year. It was started by a lady named Sarvi Emo. Now her last name is Van Maris, Sarvi Emo Van Maris. She is in Canada, and that's where it started. It started in Canada, and it's a very, very important day. Every April 25th is Parental Alienation Awareness Day. So on that day, all around the world, people will observe Parental Alienation Awareness Day. And what a lot of people do is a lot of people get proclamations from their mayors or their elected officials proclaiming that April 25th is Parental Alienation Awareness Day. So I know this year we've got a lot of people that have gathered proclamations, and that is really, really awesome to do. And if anyone wants help with doing that, let me know. I'm happy to help you learn how to get a proclamation. It's actually pretty easy. The other thing that a lot of people do on Parental Alienation Awareness Day is they have a ceremony called Bubbles of Love. So I want to say about 10 years ago, I believe, Sarvi introduced a ceremony called Bubbles of Love. So a lot of people blow bubbles, just go to the store and get a bottle of bubbles, and they blow bubbles, bubbles of love on Parental Alienation Awareness Day. So this can be kind of confusing to people, right? Bubbles of Love is a ceremony that you have in observance of Parental Alienation Awareness Day. So some people call it Bubbles of Love Day, but it's Parental Alienation Awareness Day. A lot of people host events on Parental Alienation Awareness Day. And so you can do an event in person. We've done many in person. One thing I would recommend, if you're going to have a gathering, an in-person event for Parental Alienation Awareness Day, make it family friendly, because you want to have as many people come as you can, right? So you want to be very welcoming, have it be family friendly. Remember, it's not a protest. It's not Parental Alienation Protest Day. It's Parental Alienation Awareness Day. And so you want to be friendly and welcoming to your whole community if you're going to have it in person. Maybe have it at a park, provide the bubbles for everyone. Let kids come and just have fun. And then when their parents are there, you can give them a brochure, give them a little literature about parental alienation. But the whole point of the day is to raise awareness and education. And so we need to be approachable and amicable to create as much awareness and education as possible. So everybody mark your calendar for April 25th. Go get some bottles of bubbles. And even if you just do it, you know, yourself at home, blow some bubbles of love and take some selfies and post those online, because every year there's a really nice montage video that is made showing everyone blowing their bubbles of love on Parental Alienation Awareness Day.
Right on. Is there a common hashtag that everybody uses? I mean, I know it's kind of, it might be a stretch to ask that, but
Yeah,
it would still be a great thing to include.
definitely. You know, it seems to kind of change a little bit every year, but I would say if you're going to hashtag, do hashtag bubbles of love, and or do hashtag Parental Alienation Awareness Day. And then we can pull up all of those photos.
Right on.
Well, Wendy, I think Andrew and I would like to close by just taking a second to acknowledge you and the beautiful contribution that you're making to this world and your total awesomeness. You're amazing.
Oh,
Absolutely.
thank you. That's so sweet.
Well, before I wrap up, was there anything that maybe was just left unsaid, or any as Barbara and I like to say, any pearls of wisdom that you would like to drop on the audience right before we wrap up?
I would invite everyone to visit my website. It's wendyjperry.com. And if you are an alienated parent or grandparent, I would highly encourage you to join a good support group. It can really, truly make a difference. And I would want to leave everyone with my little signature saying parental alienation can happen to anyone, so it should matter to everyone. And what I hope that we can all do really soon is normalize talking about parental alienation. Let's normalize talking about it. It's something that, like I said, it's got a stigma attached to it, and people have sort of been hesitant to talk about it. And I really want to see us normalize talking about parental alienation, because it really can happen to anyone. And as you both know, it's a really harmful abuse. And so just, you know, if you need support, reach out and, you know, share your story with others in a good support group, and let's normalize talking about parental alienation.
Absolutely.
And I know with shows like this, that's what we're doing. And so I really appreciate both of you doing this. I think it's really important that we have these conversations.
Absolutely. And I'd definitely be happy to bring you on board again sometime in the future, and, you know, we can dive deep into another topic or something like that. So absolutely.
I would love that. Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to chat with you both.
Definitely was. You beat me to my last question, which was how to best contact you. So I imagine that would be at your website.
wendyjperry.com is my website. Also, I do have a Facebook group, and that Facebook page, I should say, That is Wendy Perry, Parental Alienation and Co-Parenting Education and Support. It's kind of long. Wendy
Right
Perry,
on.
Parental Alienation.
Well, we'll definitely include that link, those links down below. All righty. And that is all we have time for today. Once again, thank you for taking the time to be with us. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our channel either on YouTube or to our podcast through the various podcast streams. Don't forget, we include a downloadable document below summarizing all these pearls of wisdom on how to get a support group up and running and what it's going to actually take. Barbara, if listeners wanted to reach out to you, what would be the best way to do so?
BarbaraLaPointe.com or BarbaraLaPointe@gmail.com.
Right on. And if you wanted to email me, you can reach me at startnow@andrewfolkler.com. As always, thank you for taking the time to be with us at the Broken Families Podcast, where we discuss and help you find solutions to divorce, parental alienation, and high conflict relationships. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you.
All righty. This was fun.